We welcome you to our final panel on the new Asian disorder. And we have a very distinguished group here to discuss, the final panel is on political economy of the new East Asian order or disorder, whatever you call it. And our chair for this panel is the very distinguished scholar and editor of journal Contemporary China, yeah, that's right. Suisheng Zhao is our chair, and our discussant will be Wu Yishan, who has stepped out for a moment. So, Professor Zhao.
Thank you. First, I want to thank UC Berkeley and particularly Lo for the kind invitation. Also want to thank Cavalier for making all the arrangements. Today I'm going to talk about one aspect of East Asian order, U.S. China-Japan Strategic Triangle. Okay. My basic arguments are pretty straightforward. I think the panelists this morning and before this one have touched upon many of what I'm going to say. First, if we define order as a stability, and I think Asia is actually doing relatively well from a historical and comparative perspective. I think Professor Friedman talked about the peace study that shows that Asia is relatively stable. But I also agree with Professor Friedman that this maybe comes before storm. We don't know. Maybe continue to be stable. There are tensions mainly related to China. And we can think about China both in structural term, balance of power, and also in behavior. We can debate when China has become more assertive. Some people may argue they probably didn't. I tend to think they became more assertive around 2010. But if we define order by the embedded purposes, I think the current East Asian order is being challenged mainly by the Trump administration. Right? I think they are challenging the fundamental principle of the U.S. created liberal order. We have to caution here, I think, as Jeremy and others have talked about, there may be different things going on at the same time. Liberal order may be only one of the elements. We can even debate whether how important it is, but it's competing and interacting with other elements. My prediction, I'm a little bit more positive. I think Asia probably will continue to be more stable than other regions, but will be less orderly and certainly less liberal. International order, and I don't have to explain to this audience what that means, is both material capability, distribution power, and also the purposes embedded in it. Phase transition, and this is a term I use to determine whether we have seen dramatic change or not. Phase transition is basically a qualitative change of behavior, right? Like solid to liquid to gas. If there was order before, there's a disorder now, then there is a phase transition. If there was a liberal order before, and now we're seeing illiberal order, then there's also a phase transition. So by that measure, I observe only moderate phase transition. And we are still in the transition period. Asian order, and does East Asia's international system have a strong component of international order? My own view, yes, represented by the United States. But liberal order has been only one component. There are other things, Cold War rivalry, non-liberal Asian states, state control guidance in the region. Certainly, U.S. military power is a part of the liberal order, and this is also until now sustained by bipartisan consensus about the U.S. role in Asia. As Tim mentioned this morning, there is now also a divide between the policy establishment and the public, and public is less welcoming of these views. Obviously, Trump is the the game changer here. I don't even have to go through this. Everyone knows, right? Okay. Let's talk about China. China is also the challenger. First of all, it represents an authoritarian stability and growth, and that's part of my assessment. I think East Asia probably will remain to be rather stable, but will be less liberal. Right? You can have authoritarian type of stability and growth, and represented by a Belt and Road Initiative (AIB). China is also, building man-made islands. People have talked about this. There's also multilateralism that to suit China's own purpose, and rivalry with the United States in attack, right? And response from Asian countries are very much mixed. I was happy to hear some reinforcement from this morning and the panel before me, right? As one would predict, Asian countries have very mixed reaction to it, depending on where they are. So yeah, I think the Asian international system is going through a transition. I think the equilibrium is breaking down, so easy to observe. And the order component is shifting, and a part of it is that the other components are also shifting. By the way, that does not necessarily mean that East Asia will become totally disorderly, right? It is possible for all these different components to work out different balance, right? And U.S., I think the change, by the way, phase transition can come from very dramatic, sudden external shock. It can also come from gradual changes. So I see the U.S. change, Trump administration, as sort of in response to cumulative gradual change domestically and internationally, the widening income and wealth gap in the country, and also partly has something to do with the East Asian political system that have never been really truly liberal or as open as the U.S. system. That partly is also building up this pressure for the change we see in the U.S. government. Okay, so the main driver, one of these, is international political economy. So that's what I'm focusing on. That's my assignment. Now the security side, even though security is hugely important. And I also agree that the basic dynamic in East Asia is really the economic side and the security side, right? And I do agree that China is becoming more dominant on the economic side. U.S. is still the security guarantor, and that's where the East Asian countries have to negotiate, try to get security insurance from the U.S., but also getting benefit from China. This is the U.S. China-Japan Triangle. I didn't do it just because Lo invited. He's one of the original thinkers. Just quickly, right? There is a triangle between U.S., Japan, and China. This is not repeat of the U.S., Soviet Union, China triangle in the Cold War, right? And one major difference is that this is also asymmetrical. Japan is ally of the United States, so in a way, it's not truly sort of autonomous, right? And but I argue in my earlier work that there was some sort of triangular tendency and features, and I would argue that this triangular dynamic has strengthened in recent years because of the change in Chinese behavior and American foreign policy change. This triangle plays out at least in security, economic, and value dimensions. I'm not going to talk about the other two. They are all connected. I'm only going to focus on the political economy dimension. Okay. The U.S. is really in a pivotal position in this triangle. And certainly the U.S. is still the most powerful country among the three, the largest economy. This is a hugely important triangle, right? Number one, number two, number three, largest economy in the world. This is very large, different from the triangle with some smaller Southeast Asian countries. This is a big one. And part of the reason why this is so important is that President Trump has changed the dynamic to a large extent, right? He is having trade war with China, and President Trump also attacks friends and foes equally, equal opportunity, and resentment against world trade. And Japan is coming up in the trade negotiation. It was supposed to be this month, but they're going to, looks like they're postponed to April, and will be very tough, all the rumor is. And also Trump wants allies to pay more. I don't know whether you have heard this scenario of cost plus 50, right? All the costs for the troops based in that country plus 50%. Okay, the Japanese media was already all over this. They're very nervous. Okay, so what it means is that the U.S. sort of Trump administration is changing the dynamic, right? Has a huge impact. Okay. About China, my own view, people may disagree with me, is that when it comes to trade and investment, I think China wants status quo. The reason is that they have been benefiting from this arrangement for all these years, right? I think the system sort of has worked to their advantage. Naturally, they want to keep it that way. Secondly, they want to expand global influence, okay? And now they're suffering some setback. We do not know whether they are going to make adaptation and pulling back somewhat. I hope they do, but I'm doubtful. You know, they may be doubling down and push even harder. I do not see Xi Jinping as a revolutionary leader. Right, he comes from an established political family, and clearly he wants greater power. But that's different from disruptive, sort of chaos, sort of kind of thing. Right, he doesn't want to burn down his own house. Put it this way. I think China initially was quite confident, and people have already talked about this at the start of a Trump administration, and they felt that. They have figured him out. They haven't. So now they are more worried about confrontation with the U.S. So this would have implication for their relationship with other countries. This is the point, right? It's a triangular relationship involving Japan in this particular case. There may be other triangular relationship. So they are trying to improve relations with Japan to avoid taking on too many enemies at the same time. So Beijing relationship with Tokyo has improved for the past 2 years, starting around 2017. And this is going to be a crucial year where the two countries are hoping to normalize the relationship completely. And I think they have a pretty good chance. Part of it is that it also suits Japan's own interest. Okay, Japan, we all know that worries about China. Right, that opinion poll, Dr. Huang showed 15%. Right? That's about right. The single, double digit, 14% has been consistent. You can't really go too much lower than that, right? That's pretty much the bottom. So they are worried about China's rise, and they want a strong alliance with the United States. That hasn't really changed. But we should not view this as Japan being less autonomous. Rather, this is actually one indication of Japan becoming more autonomous. Right? This is them making a conscious choice, right? And as a sovereign country, this is completely logical, as one can expect. At the same time, China is very important for Japan. Right, and Trump's trade war is hurting Japan as well because of supply chains. You can sort of see all the statistics. A certain percentage of Chinese export to the U.S. is being affected. Is partly originated from Japan. So they are seeking to hedge against uncertain U.S. foreign policy, and so they are doing three things. They are much larger than the medium-sized small country. They are enhancing their defense capabilities. They are trying to find more friends, Australia, India, and others, Vietnam. And they are also trying to improve relationship with China at the same time. So Abe has been very successful right now, I would say in this triangular relationship, Japan is the best position. Right now, they have better relationship with both China and the United States, and then the relationship between China and the United States. A few years ago was very different. Japan had a worse relationship, so they have improved. Part of this is that Abe's longevity as a prime minister and is paying off for them. Okay. I'll just stop here. Thanks.
Okay.